The Unconventional Therapist's Guide to Nothing.
Hey everybody, welcome to The Unconventional Therapist. This is your host, Dave. I'm joined here with my co-host, Greg. And today is the third week of February. And it's a little cold up here. And that's about it. That's it.
It's cold. I guess you could kind of call this a Valentine's Day adjacent episode.
So Valentine's was last week, right?
Yeah.
We did a nice love episode.
Mm-hmm. This might be the opposite of love.
Let me ask you, Greg, how much did the love languages impact, your following week with therapy and sessions? Did you feel like that was a focal point of a lot of your time in sessions?
Yeah, so I have the couples. I got a few couples now, and yeah, it did. It popped in. Of course, every time we do something, I find a way to kind of shoehorn it in.
It's funny because we don't intentionally do. Sometimes we do some topics like, oh, I want to learn more about that, or I want to refresh myself on that. And sometimes that's not even the case. It's just it just feels appropriate, and it still somehow seeps into the work, right?
Well, if this topic seeps in, we're doing something wrong, I think.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah, or we don't want to be in the room with the person. So, Dave, we talk a lot about serial killers. You probably talk about serial killers more than anybody I've ever met in my life. And I guess a way you can categorize them is, the way I categorize them is through severity.
Oh, okay.
And how, how they kill and who they kill, right?
It's
so
not that matters. It's not from least to greatest.
No, Dave, no.
Best to worst.
No, there's no best. So to me, that matters quite a bit, like who they're killing and how they're killing, right? So today we're going to talk about someone who focused on the young, sometimes extremely young women.
And the restless.
He would, that's very funny. He would toy with his victims, which I think is probably one of the darker elements of it, torturing them until they passed out.
A game of cat and mouse, if you will.
Sure. I mean,
Tom and Jerry
version. This is the darkest version of Tom and Jerry we've ever seen. Tom never strangled Jerry till he passed out, just to have him wake up and he's still torturing him. That's something this guy would do, and he would use his skill as a photographer and a charmer to fool everyone, the police, the victims, victims' families. In fact, he was so charming, Dave. He would be the winning contestant on a dating game, a televised dating game. And this
What's the name of this dating game?
The Dating Game. Yeah.
What?
It wasn't singled out.
Oh, I wish.
Oh, we remember that one?
Yes.
That was a good one.
The birth of Jenny McCarthy.
Chris Hardwick. They're still doing okay.
Yeah.
And I think Carmen Electra took over at some point. Getting off track here. We're going to be talking about The Dating Game Killer, and it's got that nice little kitschy little cutesy little name. This is one of the darker serial killers I think I've ever read about.
It's not intentionally, but we've gone from not so bad to progressively worse to pits. And I thought the vampire killer or the Dracula killer was going to be the bottom of the bottom, but this guy is pretty bad.
Yeah.
All right. So it's not as I didn't walk away from this topic feeling as hopeless about the world as I did with the Dracula killer. I was like, wow, that is too much. That man was too much. Mental health was just abundantly clear. This one is interesting to me because it's this one is, I'll be really interested to hear some of your takes on when we get to the diagnosis piece, because there was a lot of different elements of other people in this individual that made him a rather interesting person. But honestly, it's kind of strange that you'll hear his name here and there as far as the Dating Game Killer, but he's not as widely acknowledged as Bundy, Gacy, all those, even though he's very Bundy-like. We were talking earlier about
he's very Bundy, he's Dahmer-like in a way too. I thought of Dahmer because it's hard to. I was having a hard time pointing to something where I was like, okay, this is where it happened. This is the thing that kind of made him a killer. I think I can point to a couple, but usually when we're dealing with someone like this with such horrific crimes, there is that like Milligan, Billy Milligan being, almost buried alive and peed on by a stepfather. It's like there's always okay, I can see how that really kind of shifted.
Well, it's not that there's not that in this guy's case. It's just it's not to the extreme level that it would in our minds justify this reaction.
Well, that's what makes him terrifying, I think.
But it also kind of shows you how some people are just simply more fragile than others.
Yeah.
Right. So let's get to that before we go too much deeper on that.
Okay. So you want me to start him off in early life kind of thing?
No, let's get to the end of his life. Talk about how he passes away.
Okay. Dave, you were in a mood. All right, so you know what? We'll kind of go through his early life and upbringing, but I'm telling you, it's not. I find it very interesting because of the places my brain was going, like maybe this, maybe that. But all right, let me just get started. So, born in Texas, could that have been it? No, I'm just kidding.
That is it.
His family moves to Mexico when he's 8. He's very, very close with his father. His father, who would abandon the family when he was 11, just 3 years after moving to Mexico.
That's the moment.
Well, that's one moment. So I think there's a collection of moments here. So there's a moment there. So his mother would have to pick up the pieces, and Rodney and his 2 sisters, they moved to Los Angeles. So is Rodney this weird little kid who's, picking up roadkill off the ground and very antisocial and not making friends? No, he's not. He's actually seems to be doing quite fine. He does well in school, really well in school. I mean, to the point where he graduates top of his class in high school. But before I get to that, he's popular. He's good looking, relatively speaking. I hate how they do that. Remember the Ken and Barbie killer? And they were like, Ken was just so stunning. And it's like, you sure about that? I don't.
They say that about everyone. And I'm like, I'm watching this and I'm like, I do not think that this guy is like the heartthrob that they're making him out to sound like.
Bundy was pretty good looking.
Okay.
It's a head of hair.
Maybe what do you want me to say to that though? Like, I feel like you're forcing that opinion on me, and I'm like, I'm not arguing with you, Greg. It's just you can have that.
So here's little Rodney. He's in school. He's got lots of friends. Old Rod, doing fine. There's not that thing that anybody can. Yeah, no one can really point to something where they say like, all right, this is where Rodney's weird. Rodney, if you went back to his high school class, no one's saying, you know what? There was something about him that was just off. Maybe the father thing, like we could speculate on that. Like maybe he attacks people who have their family together. Maybe he hates young women because maybe that's what his dad left for, right? Maybe he hates women because he blames his mother. We don't know yet. We're going to have to try to figure out, speculate on a lot of things here. His mother, devoutly Catholic, and even there, like maybe there was some repression. Maybe he couldn't freely act out like these little darknesses inside of him. So they built and built and built. Potential abuse. I don't want to speculate too much, but I mean, the Catholic Church in the 70s, who knows? Who knows? Right. But there's really honestly nothing we can point to in his early life that says this is the thing that made him what he is until graduates high school, joins the army, and everything's fine in the army for a while until he has a nervous breakdown and hitchhikes across the country. Yep. So what may have caused this psychotic break, and I don't know if you got into this, but his father, who, you remember obviously abandoned the family, passed away.
Oh, you remember him from such things as abandonment.
You remember him from such things as 4 minutes ago when I told you about him. So his father, who took off on him, he goes to his father's funeral and he's like, all right, well, this stinks. I didn't get to say goodbye. I didn't really get to have a relationship with him. But he sees a group of people around the coffin sort of crying and really mourning for them. And he's like, who are these people? Oh, it's his entirely new family that he made as soon as he left. So maybe something here, Dave, develops where this dormant monster's released. Like maybe his is
Greg.
Go ahead. Yeah.
I'm going to start a podcast, a new podcast. No, actually, I'm going to take this podcast and I'm going to leave you.
I'm fired.
Yeah.
Oh shit.
And I'm just not going to talk to you for a while. And then a year later, you're going to see that I have this new co-host on our old podcast and we're super successful. Like we're driving around in like Ferraris.
feel the fire burning inside of me.
I'm wearing shades all the time, cause like indoors, because I'm like just so cool now. Shades all day.
This is working. This is
Right?
working. This is
You,
that
well, how would you feel?
jealous. Anytime,
Yeah.
anytime you feel like a valued relationship's in danger, and then what's even worse, you get jealousy. But what's even worse in this situation is the valued relationship that he could have had is in danger. These people stole his potential for a
Yeah.
relationship with his father, and they're young and they're
Yep.
girls.
They're even better looking.
They're way better looking than him. You know, again, we're being subjective, but that's how we feel. And maybe this created something inside of him where he's like, okay, now I was treated unfair. I hate people. I hate the world. I hate the young. I hate my mom. I hate everyone. Right. So he has this psychotic break, hitchhikes literally across the country to his mother's house. His mother does report him as being AWOL. So the army psychiatrist is the first one who would have this sit down conversation with him after this break. And he diagnoses him with antisocial personality disorder while simultaneously telling him that he has an IQ of 135, which, you know, that's pretty smart, right?
I actually had a higher IQ for him.
What did you get?
170.
That's really high.
Yeah, I read that somewhere.
Well, I mean, hey, look, these are just numbers, right? Smart. We can say that.
He's very smart. But Greg, you know, I always say that like when things happen, there's multiple approaches that we can take and that are going to kind of define how we navigate life. So it's like, all right. So for example, if you're a child who witnesses domestic abuse in the home, you make a conscious choice at some point. Like either I'm going to avoid any kind of abusive relationship at all costs throughout my life. And, you know, I'm going to kind of be that person that like advocates strongly against that and protects women, or I'm going to repeat the pattern, right?
That's right.
I feel like he came to a crossroad and he had a really hard time with this revelation, right? And I feel like for him, it was, I don't need this. This, like, it devastated him, but he didn't want to allow that to be his persona. So he made up this false or fake persona about himself that basically rejected any idea that anyone could ever hurt me and that I am beyond hurt, like the ability to be hurt. And I don't need anyone. But then he has rage, right? Mm-hmm. So it's this idea that I'm better than everybody. Nobody can hurt me. I'm like, I'm better off not having that man in my life. And I'm glad he's dead, all that stuff. And I'm going to just use people.
And if I hurt them,
do whatever I want.
If I hurt them, they can never hurt me.
Yep.
And they can never hurt anyone else. So what you're talking about is this, I think Edith Eger puts it better than anybody else, where you have these moments in life. And, you know, it could be traumatic. It could be this, like a moment just like this, where you could either say, it's like a 5-word phrase. You could say, why me or what now? And he's one of these people that says, why me? And becomes this victim and just completely changes his identity to hate.
Don't you think it's kind of what now though?
Well, I guess there is an element of what now
because he doesn't. It's not like he goes around talking about himself being a victim. He literally makes himself into a charismatic, like person that can attract anybody, get anything he wants.
He's a narcissist. And what do we learn about narcissists? That they're operating from a position of inferiority. Not that he really feels like he's this great guy.
Right. But doesn't that kind of fit like that whole moment though?
Oh,
like,
yeah.
I'm going to create this persona so that no one will ever see like who I truly am.
And I think it's interesting that you caught on to that, because I think when we talk about diagnosis, I picked up on that too, where it's antisocial personality disorder is a diagnosis that he has, sure, but it doesn't tell the whole story. And we can kind of get into that, because you're sort of talking about almost like a borderline type.
Yes. I actually heard that too about him. Like one of his defenders like tried saying that he had borderline and that they were trying to like explain why he might not remember some of the murders, yada yada. I don't know about that, but like there are parts of him that definitely seem very borderline.
But like him saying that doesn't even sound too much like borderline. Doesn't that seem like like a dissociative identity.
Yeah,
If
I
you
was
can.
like hearing that
I don't know
kind of
about.
like
See, sometimes they lump, and we're gonna talk about that too. Sometimes they lump borderline in with antisocial and narcissistic personality
yeah.
disorder, and I don't think it belongs there.
No, I don't
I
think
don't
so
think it
either.
belongs in like this cluster B, and like personality disorder things. I think borderline should be hanging out with like trauma disorders.
I just had this thought too as we're talking about borderline. You know, you go from like the idolization to
Yeah.
devaluation. I watched a video collage, which was really powerful, of his photography.
Mhm.
The way that it's on YouTube. If you want to look it up, you can find Rodney Alcala's photos, and they're powerful. They're these like portraits of women, and he just captures them in such a beautiful light. There's almost this feeling of an appreciation that he has for the female form, for not even just like their bodies. There's a lot of like beautiful up, like close up portrait headshots, I guess, and
Mhm.
just really beautiful photos. Kind of goes in line of like that idolization, but then he does really terrible things to them.
I can't help but kind of dip a toe in like 14th century or 15th century literature when you're talking about that. Did you know that like in Paradise Lost, what you're talking about is so sort of profound. The devil has this moment where he sees Eve and he forgets for a second that he's evil. He forgets that he's all these plans of doing this harm, and like he just sees the beauty. He's like, "Oh my God, I've forgot myself for a moment here,"
Yeah.
right? And I think that's what happens with Rodney. But then the devil has that moment when he's like, "Yeah, but I will never be able to have Eve. She'll never be mine. There'll never be love there. So now I hate her." And I think that like might be something like he'll have like family's not real. I'll never be able to have a family. You can't
Yeah.
trust a family. It doesn't work. So
Right.
I love them. I love the beauty. I can appreciate the beauty, but I hate him. And I think it's like also like he wants it so much. He wanted a family so much that the potential would be so great to have something like that. But like the other side of him is so afraid of it failing again that his brain couldn't handle it. His psyche couldn't handle it. So he has to destroy it.
All of
It's
his
scary.
all of his victims are between the age of 8 and 31.
Yeah,
That's a very like gross, but also, yeah, like family will only hurt you. But what he does is he breaks up families.
that's right.
He finds people like an 8-year-old. Why would you victimize an 8-year-old other than you have attraction to 8-year-olds, which is a whole nother thing.
Mhm.
But it's almost like tearing up a family.
Well, it's
The
an envy,
family he
right?
witnessed his dad had, he's like tearing up other families. Like
Yeah.
he probably wished he could have murdered his dad's daughters when he saw them.
Maybe he is murdering his dad's daughters when he's
Over and over
Yep.
and over.
Mm. Wow. Okay. So after the army,
Did we just solve a murder?
maybe. So after
This is
no,
this is what it
no,
feels like, I think.
we just sometimes feel like that sometimes. So after the army, he goes to UCLA where he gets a degree in fine arts. And you know what? To be honest, I kind of wanted that degree, that or carpentry. But a fine arts degree, that's kind of a cool.
Wait, you would have been Greg Charpentier Carpentier?
Yeah, that's right. Charpentier. Yeah.
Hell yeah.
So, anyways, from here, that's kind of where we set the stage of this. That there's that psychotic break, and then now that dormant monster is there somewhere, and where he starts, we don't really know. But why don't you start, Dave, running us down from the first crime when you kind of like alluded to her a
Yeah.
little bit.
Yeah. I also kind of would like that degree. I would be Dave Lizart.
Oh, yeah.
Fine art, get it?
Dave Liz fine art.
Yeah, something
that.
like that.
Yeah.
All right. So, anyways, getting to crimes and such.
Mhm.
All right.
You got to keep it light. That's because I think that we're both doing this thing where we know what you're about to say.
Yeah,
is going to be kind of
there's
hard.
a part of me that feels bad even like making jokes on an episode like this.
Yeah.
But like it's not entertaining
mechanism.
listening to people not make jokes.
Yeah, it's a defense mechanism too. Like you kind of got to keep a little bit light, but now for a second it's going to get dark.
But before it gets dark, I just wanted to say, do you know this man has like 4 aliases?
Well, John Berger as well.
Yeah, John Berger or John. Berger and Berger. Yeah, John Berger and Berger, Rod, and then his birth name was Rodrigo Jacques Alcala Buquar. I don't know if I said any of that right, but that's his.
Sounds right.
All right. So, anyways, victims. His first known victim was 8-year-old Tally Shapiro. He abducted her on her way to school. He lured her into his car, asked if she wanted to see a photo, tells her he knows her parents. I watched her speak about this because she actually survived the attack. And she said like she didn't really want to go, but was like being respectful. She's only 8 years old. Keep that in mind. And this is in the 70s. So she went against her better judgment, said she got in the car, kind of felt that something was off while she was in the car and wanted to leave immediately. But it was too late by then. He ends up bringing her to his place, but a witness follows who sees him taking the little girl is like, oh, something's up here, and follows him back to his apartment and then calls the police. Unfortunately, though, by the time the police had arrived, he had already struck Tali with a steel rod and raped her. So they walked into quite the distressing scene, obviously.
But what we'll learn with future victims is he wouldn't have been done. And what great instincts on this. There was like the cop, Rodney kind of opened the door a little bit, and the cop like pushed the door in and then saw her bloody body. Like this could have been, she lived, which is, great. But I don't think Rodney would, learn from this.
Yeah. So when the cops show up, he escapes out the back door and evades arrest. I tell you, this guy and Ted Bundy evade arrests, get out of situations and flee. It's like a thing that you do back in the 70s and early 80s when you're a serial killer, I guess. Like it's just way easier to evade police than it is now. I guess around this time, he was also put on the FBI's 10 most wanted list. Tali was badly injured, but she did survive. We'll get, she ends up in court later on. So she plays a piece in kind of her recollection of this. So actually, no, she doesn't. I'm sorry. I totally just botched that. I will get to that later. Alcala flees. Leave
the D. Leave the D.
To the East Coast, enrolls in NYU Film School. Very cool. Did you know that one of his professors was actually Roman Polanski?
I did. Another creepo, though.
Yeah. And ironically, his wife, Sharon Tate, was famously murdered the following year by
the Manson family.
So very strange.
But while she was pregnant.
Connection. Yeah, while she was pregnant. Very strange connection to all just weird stuff. But this is like, actually, there's a weird thing where like celebrities' names keep getting intertwined with them. In 1971, he was believed to have raped and strangled Cornelia Criley, I think is how you would say her name, or Crilly, in her Manhattan apartment. I believe she was the flight attendant, if I remember correctly. The same year, he gets a job working as a camp counselor, working under his alias, John Berger.
Yeah. Berger. And they're like, Mr. Berger is weird.
What's up with Mr. Berger?
He's taking pictures, I'm sure, of everyone.
And it was like it was a camp for art for like a girls' school.
Yeah, it's just
young girls, just all like just surrounded by young girls. And this
background checks are a pain in the ass, but like they're good.
Yeah, you should always do one. This was in New Hampshire, actually. I don't know what part of New Hampshire. I was kind of interested to know. Do you know?
No, I don't.
No.
Somewhere in the woods.
I'd go check it out. Two kids see the FBI poster of the, 10 most wanted. And they're like, hey, that looks like Mr. Berger. And they go and tell the camp staff about it. And they report it to authorities, which gets him extradited to California. The thing that he gets lucky with is going back to Tali Shapiro, the 8-year-old girl. By this time, her family has moved to Mexico and they won't let their daughter testify, which leads to Alcala getting off with a guilty plea and a lesser assault charge. He basically gets released after 34 months for brutally attacking and raping an 8-year-old girl. Yeah. So in 1974, he is released. And then that's the end. Until immediately after release, he kidnaps a 13-year-old girl who is referred to only as Julie J in court records, and he forces her to smoke marijuana and kisses her. He ends up being found guilty of giving marijuana to a minor and violating parole, and he's released after 2 years. So that's like, it's a thing, but it's kind of significant in the bigger scheme of all the
Well,
other.
because if they weren't smoking pot and the cops didn't like bust them for smoking pot, then that
Who
girl
knows?
was dead.
Yeah, who knows what would have happened? So she got lucky with just the kiss, I guess you would say. He's got this amazing way about him to be able to talk his way out of anything and through anything. In 1977, he somehow is able to convince his parole officer to allow him to visit family in New York City. And shortly after arriving there, he is believed to have killed Ellen Jane Hoover, who is a 23-year-old socialite, and which is also weird timing. If you think about like bigger picture, I just mentioned the Manson family
Yep.
when he was at school. This is happening at the time of the Son of Sam.
Yep.
Holy crap, that's scary. You're living in this world with all these figures. It's insane. And Ellen happens to be the goddaughter of Sammy Davis Jr. and Dean Martin. So again, connecting him to like these bigger figures, it's just crazy. How they're able to link him is they check Ellen's date book, which shows she had a meeting with John Berger, which is, obviously the alias of Alcala, on the date of her disappearance. That I believe is not discovered till later. He returns back to LA. He gets a job for the LA Times as a typesetter. I have no idea what a typesetter is. I've heard people say that phrase a number of times now. No clue. But this is only allowed because they do a very poor background check on him. Again, background checks.
Mm-hmm.
And this ends up being the newspaper that ends up running articles about his crimes too, which is like so weird. Everything, just how it all takes place. The FBI eventually connects Alcala to his old alias, and Alcala acknowledges knowing Ellen. So somehow they start to connect him to this, but he denies committing murder, and her body was yet to be found. So he was let go. So again, he's able to kind of talk his way through things and get out of that. A few other things also happened in 1977. November 9th, Los Angeles, California, Jill Barcombe, who was only 18, is raped, sodomized, repeatedly bit her right breast, strangled 3 times with a belt and pair of slacks, and killed with a rock. And then she's posed in a knee to chest position, which is very strange. Strange is she's found off of Mulholland Drive.
Yeah.
Another celebrity connection here. Marlon Brando was actually even questioned about this murder because he lived close by.
That's so, but like, why putting, like, he would do that
you
after
position
murdering, like,
people.
position people. That's got to have
I
something.
think it's for the photos, right?
Yeah.
So I have a feeling, and we'll get to photos later. I have a feeling that somewhere there is a collection of murder photos.
Oh, 100%.
I bet he was taking photos, and that's why he poses them. But those weren't found, so I bet those are hidden somewhere that no one will ever find them, or maybe one day down the road.
Why don't you ask one of your Ouija boards?
Yeah. This murder, when it was discovered, was also possibly linked to the Hillside Strangler at first. So another
Huge
person,
serial killer, yeah.
Another serial killer is also happening at this time. These were crazy times.
70s and 80s.
We talk about how crazy today's world is all the time. I just named Manson, Hillside Strangler, and Son of Sam, and that's probably not even like all of it.
This is like a really dark Forrest Gump.
It's nuts.
It is.
Also, December 16th, Georgia Wickstead, who was 27, raped, sodomized, tortured, strangled her with nylon stockings, fatally bludgeoned her with a hammer, and her genitals were mutilated post-mortem. So he was starting to really do the most heinous acts you could ever imagine. Absolutely terrible.
Like necrophilia, like really dark.
Yeah, he's like playing around at this point. This is like no respect for the bodies. Not that a murderer ever does, but like he's breaking even probably other serial killers.
He's like taboo for serial killers. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So we're getting into like that kind of stuff. This brings us to 1978. We can probably talk more about the dating game after the murders. kind of give our opinions about that footage that we both watched. But in 1978, he goes on the dating game. He wins. So he is contestant number 1. He wins. But after, she refuses to go on a date with him because when she finally met him and talked to him backstage, she thought he was too creepy. There is some train of thought by some people that are involved in this case that they feel that rejection may have angered him. And he kills at least 3 more women within the next 2 years following this.
I 100% was thinking that same thing.
Yeah. That would fit into that whole narcissistic kind of personality thing that we were talking about earlier. Charlotte Lamb, who's 31, again, more of the rape, beating, strangled with a shoelace, definitely like strangling with different objects.
Strangles
like
women.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
until they lose
pass out.
consciousness.
Yeah.
And then lets them come back too, and they wake up to they're still being tortured. That's dark.
Just to kill them.
Just to kill them, yeah.
She was posed with her body face up with her hands behind her back. And then Monique H. was a 15-year-old who was abducted, raped, and beaten, was left alive. And then we have Jill Parento, 21, raped, beaten, and strangled with a cord or a stocking. This is like a lot.
Yeah.
The last known victim was 12-year-old Robin Samso. So she was abducted on her way to ballet class in 1979 in Huntington Beach. Her decomposing body was found in the Sierra Madres 12 days later. On the day of her appearance, Alcala was seen trying to get her and a friend to take swimsuit photos for him, but he was chased away by a neighbor. The day before, he had tried to convince 2 other teenage girls to do this as well by offering them marijuana. So that seemed to be like he's always like luring them with something like marijuana or photos or whatever. An LA National Forest Ranger testified that later that he saw a man matching Alcala's description and driving the same make and model of car, leading a girl down a stream on June 20th. On July 24th, he was finally arrested for Robin Samso's murder. When the investigators searched his mother's house, they found a key for a storage locker in Seattle, which contained hundreds of photos, mostly of younger girls, many nude or in swimsuits, and he is actually present in some of the photos as well. So there's no like denying who took them or his presence with them. The locker also contained a pair of earrings belonging to Samso and another pair that was found to have DNA of Charlotte Lamb. Yeah. So I mean, he's also taking earrings as like trophies.
Right. Yeah, I'm surprised they never found pictures because there's definitely pictures.
Yeah. The pictures they found, well, they only made, let's see, I think it was 100 were made public, but there's still so many others that were never made public, which
suggests there's probably young kids, bad pictures, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Not even the murder, just explicit.
So here we are with court stuff. And then while we're doing the court stuff, also other victims end up becoming discovered or found that he gets linked to. But Greg, the court stuff
kind of boring, except for the end.
Kind of boring. There is all this other stuff. Like he just gets lucky a lot of the time. So like he's found guilty and sentenced to death in 1980, but his sentence is overturned twice. In 84, one of the juror members was told about his previous convictions before the trial, which obviously they're not supposed to know anything about that. And then in 1986, on the grounds that a witness had been hypnotized. I didn't know if you had heard that.
No.
Or what that was about. I'm not really sure.
No, I went straight to the third and final trial. Did you hear about this thing?
So, yes, but maybe you can describe it for everyone.
Well, I mean, because the trials can be kind of a boring. So we usually kind of like, unless there's some like wildness to it, like Menendez brothers, that was kind of an important trial. But this trial, I mean, the story is like the personality, not the trial in this case. But the personality came out in the third trial because he represented himself.
Yeah.
And he questioned himself. But in order to question himself, he used different voices. he would use one voice to ask himself a question and another voice to answer. And in his closing arguments, he plays the song Alice's Restaurant by Arlo Guthrie. And in that song, it talks about how a patient tells a psychiatrist that he wants to kill. So I think that was his way of saying, like, I was warning people over and over again. You guys had so many chances. You had me in so many psychiatrists' office, and nothing ever stopped me. Like, I tried to warn you people. And there was a surprise witness in this trial, the kind of nail in the coffin, and that was Tali Shapiro.
Yeah.
So she didn't make it to defend herself, but she did come to be a voice for the rest of the. So that's the hero in this.
Yeah, and only by chance does she survive and even able to do this. So it's almost like a movie, the way that it plays out for her to be able to come back in and do that. He actually writes a book while he's in prison before that third trial called "You, the Jury." He denies killing Samso in the book, and he also attempts to sue the California penal system twice. Once for a slip and fall accident, and once because the prison hadn't given him a low-fat diet. So this man was spiraling, clearly. I think I'm going to get that book, though.
I'm sure you will. You will.
I probably have to.
So, I mean, I could talk a little bit about, I don't know how important it is, but I could talk a little bit about diagnosis. And I think that honestly, when we were going through the early life, I think we really kind of hit some things that kind of make this a moot point. But I do want to mention that when we talked about the dark psychology episode, or when we did that episode, we talked about the dark triad and, narcissism, Machiavellianism, David Machiavellianism, and psychopathy, which is something you see throughout. That's not really a diagnosis. That's just, it's almost like a literature trope, or even just a way to describe someone like outside of just like personality types, right? But for him, there's also sexual sadism, which is arousal at the sight of extreme pain or humiliation of the victim, which he loved. He found such like pleasure in humiliating the victim that, obviously that has its roots in what we were talking about earlier. But I mean, that's something that's playing a role here.
You know what I find interesting though about him?
What's that?
There's so little that we actually know about the way his mind works. So many of them will start to just unload all their like perversions and just say so much about like why, and maybe not answer the exact why, but they give so much like context to things. We get nothing from him. Everything is assumption based. Like we don't even know that he's full, like what arouses him about those situations. We're all have to make guesses. And I mean, it's pretty clear, like if he's raping people, that obviously there was an arousal at some point, but like, it's not like, Gacy or Dahmer or even Richard Ramirez, where they're like talking a ton. Like did you find any interviews?
No. And I think you're touching on something there where it's like, we kind of, and you and I are doing it. We're making all these connections, oh, maybe it's because of this, or maybe the family here and this and that. But maybe we have to do that as a protective, something that we do for ourselves, so that we can't believe that this could be a monster just out there for no reason. Because that's scary, right?
I mean, look at even like BTK, who I can't wait to do that episode one day. But like he's in the court just talking about victim after victim. We don't get that moment with him.
Yeah.
With Alcala, like I think that's why it feels so important to do it with him, is because we need to understand why, because our minds have such a hard time being able to wrap around these heinous acts of like, why would this man do this? His life was not that bad.
No, it's fine.
Compared to, people who have really bad lives, his was like, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
I mean, that's minimizing a person's experience, and we shouldn't ever do that, because like I said, some people are more fragile than others. Some people's tolerance for stress is significantly less than others. But still, like,
now this is like the dark. This is one of those things where we talked about in the past, like there's sometimes things that you can do that are so awful that there's no coming back from it. Like you've corrupted your soul. Remember in the narcissistic personality disorder, we talked about there's sort of this fringe piece of that you rarely see, and it's like malignant narcissism, and it's that extreme mix of narcissism, antisocial behavior, aggression, and sadism. That's this guy, right? And that's under the umbrella of narcissistic personality disorder. So that's and then of course add in psychopathy, which we mention, which that's that persistent antisocial behavior, impaired empathy and remorse. That's under the umbrella of antisocial personality disorder. So when people are calling him a narcissist and people are calling him having an antisocial personality, they're not wrong. And maybe he's borderline too, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's just a wild, cluster of diagnosis that just a perfect storm. Or
Maybe he
maybe
has
it's
like
just us
maybe he has like
looking for something.
depression.
Yeah, you think that's what it is?
It's like depression,
Heavy depression. Yeah, yeah. I think it
major
might be.
depressive disorder.
I think it goes a little bit deeper than that, but I do. I think it'll be fun though because we did do this thing where we both watched this, the dating game.
Yeah.
Like, what were some of your thoughts on that? Can I say one
So
thing? Though?
I read your notes, and your notes, I literally didn't look at your notes before I wrote mine.
Yeah.
They are identical. It's funny. We literally wrote down the word grunting.
Yes. Like,
yeah. So, all right. So the episode starts, and we both wrote down. All right. Read your notes for how about the episode, not about him. Read your notes.
So much sexual innuendo.
I wrote show is full of innuendos. I swear to God, I didn't look at your notes, and we both wrote the same thing.
I mean, right off the bat, they come in
right.
hot.
I forget the guy. What's the announcer's name?
Oh, I forget.
Artie Lang? No.
Did you want me to say the joke he made about what she used to do for work?
Yeah. She was what was she, a foot massager?
She was a foot massager, and she left because her boss suggested that she works her way up.
Yeah.
It's like,
I mean, that was the first thing that they say.
Yeah.
So it's full of, her name's Cheryl Bradshaw. She's the bachelorette, quote unquote. She's the single lady that's going to be meeting these three eligible bachelors. He is bachelor one, and he's introduced as professional photographer whose father found him in the dark room, fully developed.
Yeah.
What?
I know. I don't even know what it's funny too is because like the woman herself, she's over the top. And a little
I thought she was gonna reject like the innuendos at first, but no, she went right with them.
She starts making like voices and everything too. She's very into it.
She was very cool.
She was attractive too.
She was attractive.
Oh man, I beg to differ. I found her. I was like, oh okay, so yeah, she is off. What about the whole banana thing?
Well, before the banana thing,
okay.
When they say, they tell them each to say hello.
Yeah,
he doesn't say hello. He says, "We're gonna have a great time together, Cheryl." Say hello. We're gonna have a great time together, Cheryl.
This guy
that was creepy right there.
It's also creepy too when she says like, "What's your favorite time?" And he goes, "The nighttime. It's the only time." It's like
nighttime when it really gets good.
Yeah. And then she goes, "Oh," she's like, "I'm having you for dinner. What are you?" And he goes, I'm a banana." And then the crowd's laughing. And then he goes, "Peel me," and everyone just dies laughing.
No, wait, there was so much more. Well, first he goes, I'm called the banana and I look really good. So that was like strange. I actually wrote down quick-witted. She said, what makes you look so good? Or what do you look like? And he goes, "Peel me." He said it immediately.
Yeah.
Dude was on point. That was such a fire response right there.
Yeah.
I was like, bang, roasted, dude.
Yeah, because he's a banana.
I wonder why you won, Rodney.
Yeah, but did you kind of so she couldn't see him, and I think that's why she picked him, because it's almost like his affect, the way his face is behaving, it didn't match sort of like the mood. It's like he didn't know how to really.
Granted, we are overanalyzing because we know this man is raped and murdered.
Sure.
For years.
And that's something that's so crazy. Like he's sitting in this, like having this fun little playful moment, and that he's already committed horrific murders.
And he's like literally doing it right after. Yeah.
Oh, she was gonna die.
So at one point she tells him, "Make an imitation of a dirty old man," and that's when he does the "Come over here." And he makes the worst face possible.
It's 5 minutes on YouTube. It's worth a checkout. I mean, really it is.
Yeah, his grin was just like menacing and like
no, but she was I don't know. I worry about her too. I wonder what she's up to.
Just looked like a lot of fun,
Okay. All right. I mean, trust me. Hey, look, I'm there with you. I think she was great. Yeah. So I mean, there's a lot you can kind of glean from that. I think if anything, it's just really kind of the juxtaposition of this lighthearted, fun dating game, and there's a monster
Yeah,
just waiting.
it is like such an amazing moment in like American television if you think about it,
Yeah.
to have this on tape. It is literally the equivalent of the Mark Jackson NBA basketball card with the Menendez brothers sitting front row that like everybody who collects that kind of stuff is goes nuts over. It's like we have this like recorded document of their presence in the
Yeah.
world, like in general public. I think that's what makes it so like that kind of stuff. It makes it so interesting to us because it's like we hear about it, we see documentaries, like now we're like it's all over the place in documentaries, but to just see a person blending in, it
Out of
shows you,
context, right? Yeah. It's just
yeah, it just shows you how like it really is just what do you call it? Like visible, like they're just invisible,
yeah, hiding in plain sight.
hiding in plain sight. Yes, thank you. And it's just so amazing.
It is
really
amazing. I think it's like what like really like fascinating parts about it for me. I think that's all we get on that.
Well, yeah, the dating game. I mean, it's
Yeah.
literally like I was expecting it to be like a longer episode. The way that like that's the name. The guy's serial killer name is the Dating Game Show, but it's literally a 5 minute experience of his life. I just want to go back to the trials because we did mention the third trial and how crazy that was. So I just kind of want to wrap him up a little bit here. No pun intended, but like he did pass away. But he was still on death row and he was awaiting the death and execution pretty much before. But back to the photos first. I'm sorry. So he dies of natural causes on July 24th of 2021, not that long ago, while he's on death row in California State Prison in Cochran, California. So that's where he passes away. Natural causes, quote unquote.
Yeah.
But those photos. So the photos, like I said, there was over 900 sexually explicit photos found in his locker. 21 women have come forward and identified themselves as women in the photos. And about 6 families have also claimed that a photo contained one of their long lost family members, said, thought to be maybe potential victims. So finding those photos has actually helped, I guess, solve some cold cases. Because I mean, let's like, in all honesty, like he was murdering people and they weren't found till like some of them weren't found till years later or identified right away. Like this is something that like right up until 2016, that Christine Ruth Thornton, her body was found in Wyoming in 1982, 5 years after her disappearance. She so he wasn't charged with that till 2016. So that's crazy if you think about.
So this lends itself to like this idea that there could be like over 100.
Yes. Yeah. So there's the confirmed amount, which I think is like we were both saying before we got on
between
here.
7 and 9.
Yeah, it's like it's crazy how like it differs depending on where you read it. But then it could be actually over 100, up to 130 maybe. Christine Ruth Thornton was kind of an interesting one. So she was pregnant and she was traveling from Wyoming to Montana, just like kind of on a whim. She was like a free spirit. She was going with her boyfriend to pan for gold. Huh. And then they end up getting in a fight in like southern Wyoming and the boyfriend leaves her. And there's a photo of her on a motorcycle or something like that. So he must have like found her hitchhiking. And then she's found in the desert later, 5 years later.
Like that's a movie too. Like, he's probably like running away from something or backing out. And like, he just sees like a woman alone in the woods and he's like, oh my God.
Yeah. The picture of her on the motorcycle is kind of haunting because she looks happy. And then like what happens to her. And like, I feel for those families when they're having to see that later. You're getting these photos that are released and it's like you see that moment of them sometime before the murder.
Yeah.
And maybe it's a nice feeling in some ways because maybe they're smiling. Yeah. But then it's like you also know what happened to them later. It's like, oh my God. It must be such a mixture of emotions.
Ugh. Wow. Dave, thanks for bringing us way back down.
You're welcome.
Well, hold on. Let me say something. Are you wrapped up with the court
Well, I
stuff?
was going to ask you something about like the murder in general.
Okay, sure.
What do you think that's about with well, the rape thing, like that's a thing, but also he strangles with like pant legs, stocking, shoelaces, and also like the bludgeoning, like he beats people with like blunt objects, like his MO. That's like his style, right? Why?
Yeah, personal, super personal. I mean, using his hands. So I think there's definitely emotionally charged
Do you
murder.
think it's sexual with the stockings and shoelaces and
I think the
like because he could
strangulation
use
is.
he could use his hands.
I think that's been, I won't get into detail, but that's been sort of a through line in the past with sexual sadism. The strangling causes things that make, um, well, I think you can kind of like draw the line, like, fill in the blanks there. So yeah, so that could be more of a sexual thing. The bludgeoning is more of an emotional reaction. And I think that it's like we talked about before, I think over and over again, he's killing, his father's new family. He's killing his father. He's killing his mother. I think insert whatever thing here. But I honestly, that is the shift when he sees his father's new family and the potential of him. Like maybe he's always what's been dragging him along was that potential that like one day him and his father will reunite and be a family again. And then once he knew that having a family and family was never going to be a thing for him. Family doesn't exist. He'll always be in pain for the rest of his life. I think he wanted to take that from everyone else, or he saw everyone else as the people that took that from him.
Yeah.
However you want to like look at
Yeah.
that.
And the other part of this is like that we mentioned is he's kind of a genius.
Oh,
IQ
yeah.
wise. I don't understand how we get to someone being that smart and still like I guess that intelligence possibly helps him think some of this stuff through so he can figure out his way to like talk through situations, but like such a wasted talent.
Dave, logic has nothing to do with so your intelligence has nothing to do with emotion though. We know that. So if it's, remember that story of that, what was it? She was an astronaut and her husband. So here's a person, a million, like, logic, all the science, all this stuff that you can ever imagine, just brains everywhere. She, had, was cheated on or something like that. And the emotion of jealousy took her over so much that she kind of traveled across country in a diaper to go kill a woman. Like, you know what I mean? So it's like the power, the emotional, like to try to control that emotion, that's such a strong emotion is, I mean, that genius isn't going to do anything but help.
Yeah. Yeah. It can make a scary combination.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Like it is a scary combination. So yeah, I mean, I guess the only thing I have left is a singled out reboot would have been fantastic. We brought that up earlier. I don't know if you watched Love Connection.
Like
This is
80s.
Yeah, Chuck Woolery.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
What a great show that was. I mean, that's
of course I did.
Yeah, that was I'm just trying to lighten it up towards the end here. That
Love
was a good
Island.
show. Love Island. I feel like that's good. Fantasy Island?
No, you're
Oh, you're talking about like a new show. Okay. Yeah. Nope, not me.
Bachelor in Paradise.
Leave me in the 80s. Unless it's a Vanderpump.
Bachelor in Paradise.
Don't know any of that stuff. David, we have
Love is Blind.
A shout out we need to give today.
Shout out to Love is Blind.
Shout out to Love is Blind, proud sponsor of the podcast. We wish.
We have a review.
Oh, okay.
Can I get some like music, Greg?
No.
All right, thanks.
I don't do any of that.
Oh, you're the worst. All right. So our review comes from, we have no idea because it's XDFJGI. I think that's just like if you decide to not like give yourself a name, I think they just give you a bunch of letters. So the review starts off with, it feels like I'm having coffee with my best friends, I'm assuming is the last part of it because it's cut off on my phone. But 5 stars, which is amazing. Thank you. I'm so happy I found this podcast. The way they talk about topics makes psychology so approachable and fun. They're so kind. I messaged them, not thinking I would have an amazing conversation with them. Highly recommend. Awesome. Thank you so much. Amazing conversation.
Yeah, well, here's the thing, Dave, that
Humble
people
brag.
would thank you. But here's the thing, though. The people forget that most of the time we are like engaged by their amazing conversation. Like, you know what I mean? Like, people will send us some stuff and they'll be like, you should think about this, or maybe you should look at this from this way. And we're like, oh,
Yeah.
wow, this person's not like, they need to be doing this podcast, right? Like, and we've had that recently with this person who we think we know who that is. And yeah, no, you're the one who's giving us the amazing conversation, and we want more and more of it. So please bring it.
Absolutely.
Bring
It just literally makes our day. Literally, as soon as we get the review or the message or whatever, one of us is texting the other to say, hey, go check this out. This is awesome. Usually found with oh my God, or that was so great response. But like, yeah, we just absolutely love this stuff.
Love it.
Yeah, it was so funny. Somebody wrote a comment to you or to us, and you wrote, "We love hearing it. That's what gives us the motivation." And they said, "We know your love language." So I mean, I love the reference to the love languages podcast. So yeah, you're right. They are absolutely amazing, and we are super lucky to just have an audience that just fills up with like appreciation, but just like intelligence and witty and thoughtful responses. And so far, knock on wood, no toxicity in our group as far as we can tell.
Well, there was that one guy that was mad that we didn't do enough mushrooms to do a mushrooms episode. I'm still on that.
Challenge accepted.
yeah mushrooms part 2. Okay. We can do that.
All right, so if you would love to support this podcast to make sure it keeps going, to make sure we don't get deflated and decide to end it, then we need your help. What we need from you is a review. If you want to do that, super easy. Just give us a couple of stars, write down a quick couple of comments of why you like us.
Would be good.
Yeah, a couple meaning 5.
Okay.
Write down a few sentences telling what you appreciate about the podcast or what you wish was different, and we will accept whatever you have to say, and we'll read it on here no matter what it says, but please be kind. So that's the best way. We also have the subscribers page, which right now it's mostly just shout outs and stuff like that, but down the road we hope to be able to provide some merch and other things to those subscribers. Even if you already subscribed, we would obviously make sure that you get whatever we have going out at some point down the road. And that's found on the Buzzsprout subscribe page or something, but that links in our Instagram bio if you guys are on Instagram. We're also on X, trying to work on building a little bit of a presence on there, but that's a tough ground over there.
Tough ground.
But yeah, and so if you want to reach us, those are the places to do so. And we love hearing from you, so please don't be shy. Other than that, yeah, we will see you next week. I'm just gonna let people know this is also Black History Month. We always make sure that we pack in an episode that honors special occasions, special months, special holidays. Black History Month is no different than any others. So we are definitely coming with a topic next week that will honor that. And I find it super interesting. I'm trying to convince Greg that it's going to be interesting. I think he's going to dig it once he gets into it.
Last year was very interesting.
It was, yeah. And
the Tulsa race.
I think this year will be as well. So
yeah,
we will see.
All right, we'll see.
But yeah, we'll be here next week, and hope everybody has a safe, healthy, and awesome week. Listen to our episode like 5 times on all different servers. So.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, everybody. Have a great night. See you later.